1-2. 1-2. Κυρίες και κύριοι, κύριοι γραμματείς και όλοι όσοι μας παρακολουθείτε μέσω της σελίδας του Υπουργείου στο Facebook.
Through the Facebook page of the Ministry, so our online viewers, welcome to the event organized by the General Secretariat for Telecommunications and Posts in collaboration with ENISA and the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece on a topic that is not very common. However, we gradually hope that over the next few years it will become part of our daily life. Cybersecurity we're talking about today, and more specifically that part of cybersecurity that has to do with women. Women in cyber is the topic of today's event, organized here at Telexpo Veth. And we need to keep in mind that we are moving into the era of the cyber era at an extremely rapid pace after a delay of many years. But we have moved forward in leaps and bounds, and we are trying to catch up with the rest of Europe. At the same time, we simultaneously need to take the steps forward in the field of cybersecurity also, and that is the meaning of all the events and activities that have been taking place in the last 2 years at the Ministry of Digital Governance and the National Cybersecurity Authority. My name is Marianna Piriotti, and I'm here in a double capacity as a former journalist and a co-founder of Dome Consulting, which is a cyber crisis management company. As you shall hear during the event and from the panel, cybersecurity is a multidisciplinary issue and not, as most people might think, a purely IT security issue. So, welcome. And at this point, I would like to call to the floor the Secretary General of Telecommunications and Posts from the Ministry of Digital Governance, Dr. Athanasios Stavris. You have the floor. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank all those present here today. Although the weather is beautiful outside, I'm going to speak very briefly, very concisely. In the last 3 years, we've moved forward in leaps and bounds in digital governance, and that is something that we all recognize. At the same time, needs have been identified, and I'm not only speaking about Greece, but also the global problem that exists that has to do with the lack of professionals in the field of cybersecurity. A little while ago, I read an article that mentioned that on a global level, there's a lack of by 65% in order to cover existing needs. And I'm not even speaking about the future needs, which are going to be increased in exponential terms. So we need to move in two directions. The one has to do with figures. Too few people working in cybersecurity on a technical, political, or legal level. And out of these few people, there are even fewer, I don't know what the number is, are those who are considered to be experts in the field. That means that we should focus on both these initiatives, increase the number overall, and improve the quality. So the title of this panel, Women in Cyber, is something that is very interesting indeed, and it is with great pleasure that I can say that the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece have actually achieved this. Half of those working at the authority are women today. But we want even more professionals in the field of cybersecurity. We want to move one step further. Also, not only nationally, but also on a European level, we have the pleasure to have with us NISA today. And we want professionals that need to be systematically trained either in the public or private sector. Continuous training is required. These people need to be at the cutting edge of technology, both with regard to legal issues and policy issues. Cybersecurity, or rather there is a feeling that cybersecurity is in the hands of specific organizations or bodies which have the word cybersecurity in their title, or cyber defense. I have found that it is much easier to explain to people what cybersecurity means when I use the simile of driving a car. Everyone drives a car, but we are not all professional drivers. So all those of us who drive a car in order to go to work or to do our shopping, we all have to follow some specific rules. We need to adhere to the driving code that we have been trained on, and we know what the consequences will be if we do not. And I'm not talking about fines, I'm talking about accidents. So, in the same way, we need to introduce into our DNA the fact that cybersecurity is an issue that concerns us all, from children from the age of 9 to 99. So, in collaboration with NISA, cybersecurity aims and manages to train people on a horizontal basis, and that is our goal, to train citizens with regard to new data, to be secure, not only to feel secure, and also to increase the number of professionals that are involved in the cybersecurity sector. We want to increase the numbers and increase the specialization. And I will conclude by saying that I would like to dearly thank the members of the National Cybersecurity Authority and the General Secretariat of Telecommunications and Posts. These two pillars of my General Secretariat together are the driving force for me and for our Minister and the government along the route that we need to follow in order to organize things that work well, to cover the gaps of the past, as Kyriakos Pierakakis has mentioned, our minister very rightly, and also in order to design the future of our country, because that is what we deserve. Now, I would like to invite the Secretary General of Digital Governance and Simplification of Processes to the podium, who is going to explain to you how cybersecurity is something that concerns us all. Mr. Christopoulos.
Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Θανάση, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Είμαι πολύ χαρούμενος που βρίσκομαι σε αυτήν την πολύ έτσι ενδιαφέρον.
Thank you, Thanasis, for your introduction. I am delighted to be here at this very interesting discussion and event, and I'm really looking forward to hear all that is going to be discussed. The truth is that the topic women and cyber also touches upon the issue of women and new technologies. At the General Secretariat of Digital Governance are responsible for reskilling and upskilling and digital skilling strategy of the ministry. And as Thanasis mentioned, in the last 3 years, we have achieved a lot in the field of digitalization of processes through gov.gr, which has expanded greatly compared to the first day it operated in March 2020. The number of initial digital services has more than tripled. The other pillar that we realize we need to invest in as a General Secretariat of Digital Governance and as a Ministry of Digital Governance is to create the human capital that is required in order to support all this potential that has been created with regard to digital transformation. At the same time, we need to raise awareness among citizens and society with regard to issues that have to do with digital transformation, so that there is this fear of what is new, of technological evolution, ceases to exist. Greece in general, and according to the DAISY index specifically with regard to women who are experts in IT, is doing quite well. There is an increase from 20% in 2019 to 27% in 2020, which is a very pleasant result indeed, because it is above the EU average, which is 19%. So this is a sub-index of DAISY that we are all monitoring, because it is also an index for our work, which really brings us pleasure. Nevertheless, on a European and global level, things are problematic, and that is why the EU aspires, since the percentage of women involved in cybersecurity in the EU is quite low, the EU, in collaboration with the Women for Cyber Initiative or the European Organization for Cybersecurity, has organized a registry with women who are experts in cybersecurity in order to reduce the underrepresentation of women in this field. And they have also undertaken a series of initiatives in order to promote and encourage young women to get involved professionally in IT and cybersecurity, more specifically, such as EU Code Week, Grand Coalition for Digital Jobs, European Network for Women Entrepreneur Hubs, Startup Hub, etc. What is needed is a great change of culture and mentality, however. We need a change in skills on a broader scale in order to be able to address the problems that exist. And these problems are usually due to the very rapid development of technology, both in the public and private sphere. So in that sense, we at the Ministry of Digital Governance support the General Secretariat of Telecommunications through our new Ministerial Plan of Digital Transformation, and NSRF 2021-2027. It's a new program that did not exist previously and was created many years after the old digital convergence plan. Now, about 115 million is allocated to digital reskilling and upskilling for workers in the private and public sector, and a large part of this money we are now discussing this with the General Secretary for Telecommunications, is to be allocated for cybersecurity skills. So I'd like to conclude at this point because we are all interested in listening to the discussion that will follow. So I wish you every success, and it is with extremely great interest that I'm looking forward to hearing the panel with regard to women in cyber. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Stavridis and Mr. Christopoulos. Now I'd like to call to the floor as keynote speaker, one of the pioneers in the field of cybersecurity, Dr. Dimitris Gritzalis. He is a professor of cybersecurity at the Department of Informatics of the Athens University of Economics and Business.
Κύριε Πυριώτη, με φόβησε το πρωτοπόρος, αν και ταιριάζει με τα γκρίζα μου.
Although maybe it goes with my gray hair. No, it's true. You are considered a pioneer in the field in Greece. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, children of mine, from an academic perspective, a professor tries to move along with his students in their adventure in knowledge, helping them to outline their dreams, and when he or she is lucky or worthy, one feels proud in the road that they follow. Well, today I shall try to do the first and second of these things, but nevertheless I also have the pleasure to enjoy the third, and the pleasure is great because it goes together with today's topic. I have the pleasure, that is, to enjoy seeing beloved students of mine who followed the road that they wish to follow and were worthy of. Nevertheless, such a presentation was used by myself also as an impetus in order to move one step further, in order to outline a dream that is not only a dream of yours, but a dream that we all share. So, three things to start with. What is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is a cognitive area which has a specific objective, that is, to provide sufficient protection of three types: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all types of commodities available in cyberspace in a very particular environment. Cybersecurity also is something more, and something very important. It is something that in our daily life is not often found, but only sporadically, or rather rarely. Cybersecurity is the most effective technological medium we have today, particularly in digitally advanced socioeconomic environments, that can promote, strengthen, or impose, or on the contrary, question or undermine any form of power. There is no other technology that has this capacity. So it can change things drastically, and that is the core of the essence of this cognitive area. So, cybersecurity experts, and I believe my dear colleague, the General Secretary of Telecommunications and Posts, mentioned this precisely. Cybersecurity experts does not only consist of people who are experts in cybersecurity, but also other specialists as well. I shall be speaking about my experts, however, today from a methodological perspective, and the numbers, the figures, the statistics that I will speak about does not have to do with those working in the cybersecurity sector in general, but the experts specifically. So my methodological basis is that those who are considered experts, those who have done specialized studies and have certifications or hold such positions, or are IT experts and spend more than 25% of their time on cybersecurity. This is an arbitrary methodological hypothesis that I will use to base the rest of my presentation, and I'm sure that some of what you're going to hear will surprise you. The way in which we view issues related to cybersecurity, not us, people of the academia, research and teaching, but all those who utilize these technologies have various viewings of the matter. It's like the way we see a glass that where half of its volume is full of water. And you can view this in lots of different ways that you can see in the picture in the middle. And you can choose the one that expresses your opinion best. My viewing of this glass is the one bottom right. As an academic professor, that is what I had to do. That's what they told me I had to do. But that's what I opted for as well. So you are going to listen today about such a viewing that may seem more or less radical than what you expect, but it is something that I strongly believe. Ladies and gentlemen, today, for a person to consider themselves or to name themselves a cybersecurity expert, they have to follow some specific formal routes. They are not the only ones, they're not the predominant ones, but they are the formal ones. So they have to do studies on a postgraduate level. There are no specialized studies on a bachelor level. And in my opinion, that is correct, although US and UK education disagrees with this, and they have bachelor degrees in cybersecurity. A PhD. In Greece, we have 4 universities that provide masters in cybersecurity. The Athens University of Economics, the University of Aegean, of Western Attica, and of Piraeus. There's no surprise that these 4 include 2 of the oldest Greek business schools. And there are training programs also offered by various authorities outside the field of formal education in order to have sufficient knowledge in order to take your first steps in the field. The professional specializations that exist are numerous, and you see the names here. They are very ingenious. When my wife and I were going through some neighborhoods in London, and we found the name funeral director and cemetery manager. So this ingenuity of the Anglo-Saxons can be quite impressive. Here you see 15 different specializations that I have chosen, not arbitrarily. The blue ones are the ones that are most popular. The green ones are the ones that are best paid. My experience and my age allows me to have this knowledge. And the red ones are the ones that are currently evolving. And recently, the one which is the most interesting with regard to demand is being a DPO. Knowing GDPR and being a DPO, Data Protection Officer, as the people say in my neighborhood of Eraleo. A very interesting, fascinating profession. And those of us who have worked in hybrid environments, IT and legal, and when I worked at the GDPR authority, and when I was writing legal papers with colleagues, this was a fascinating part of my life. And this is the most popular profession today, but there are many others, both in the private and the public sector, with the private sector being at the foreground. Nevertheless, the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece has also taken a great step forward, and now it has to take an even bigger step forward that will need to be well-founded. That's why it's expecting and deserves every support from those that can help in this field. So, as first among equals, the one who opened this and paved this road of effectiveness in digital governance is a graduate of ours who is the first among equals and makes us very proud is Kyriakos Piarakakis, my dear student. The Athens University of Economics and Business is very proud because we have had such a worthy student, first among equals, and I repeat this because I have other students before me here today. Ladies and gentlemen, employment in cybersecurity is a topic that has been viewed from many aspects. Mr. Stavridis spoke about the statistical figures, and they are based on a specific methodology. My methodology is based on research that supports and analyzes the data concerning cybersecurity experts. So people who have a relevant degree or specialize in cybersecurity and spend more than a quarter of their time working on such issues. So from 2017 to 2021, the number of women working in cybersecurity in the US more than doubled. In 2021, empty posts in cybersecurity in some countries in the world which are technologically advanced exceeded 3 million posts. 500,000 such posts can be found in North America. So if, let's say, in future, tomorrow, you want your child, someone you know, to take a job that will be sought after, they should get involved in cybersecurity. But if they think that this is a job where they will get quickly specialized, get a lot of money, and find an easy job, then they will fail. You have to be responsible, consistent, democratically aware. Otherwise, you can be a dangerous professional. That is the right word to use. So you see that in 2017, experts in cybersecurity reached the percentages you see here, 14% in the US, 7% in Europe, 5% in the Middle East, etc. We're talking about the percentage of women in cybersecurity. So we're talking about the quantitative aspect. Let's talk about the qualitative aspect too. And there you'll see some surprises. There is a stereotype that we academic professors are well aware of, those working in STEM. In science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, there's a stereotype that says that these professions don't really suit women, our daughters, our girls, our girlfriends. It's a man's job. Well, I'm not going to go into this because I'm not an expert. I just mention it because today that is considered a stereotype that still exists. What we need to do is to question it. At the IT department of the Athens University of Economics, women students are about 40% of the total, 60% are male. So this subverts this stereotype. And this is the department I am fortunate enough to work for. So the more of experts, or rather the percentages that we see with regard to cybersecurity experts, we're talking about technologically advanced countries, US, Canada, Singapore, advanced countries in the US, Brazil, Argentina, UK, France, and Germany. Give us the following figures that are very interesting. Look at the participation of women in green with regard to cybersecurity workforce. So we see that we have an increase in the number of women from 11 to 24% and men 89 down to 76%. Second line, those who had the best qualifications, 52% women. Those who give the most importance to specialist studies and certifications, 28% women. Look at the fourth row and pay attention to this. And I am proud because in the panel that follows, I am proud as an academic professor Because in the panel that follows, you shall see women in this category. Women who are closer to decision-making posts, in posts of responsibility. 11% women, 6% men. We're talking about the outline of those working in the field. Do these women actually hold posts of responsibility? Yes, they do. So the research on this topic says that there is no qualitative issue. In actual fact, the figures are the reverse of what we think. Men hold the largest number of posts. Nevertheless, when it is time to choose who will hold the posts of responsibility, then decision makers mainly choose women for these posts. And let's move on. Of course, men, and I am basically being ironic, I get paid more than women in these professions. So we have women and men who hold more or less equal number of posts in the various fields of the economy. I'm talking about the last row. The average age of the women is lower, second row. When you look at the panel in a few minutes, this will be clearly visible. Well-qualified, young, capable women in posts of responsibility. And we didn't choose these women because of the topic, because the study shows that this is actually a reflection of reality. And it is not the only sector where this is the case. We see differentiation between women and men when we start looking at the concerns of our professionals, the women and men who are our colleagues. With regard to their professional concerns, we see differences between men and women concerning an indifferent management, lack of balance between personal and professional life, a lack of well-qualified staff, lack of resources, and delay in lifelong learning and training. And here you see who are most concerned about this. Who are those who look into these issues more? You see that the women do. Our women, our wives, our students, according to the statistics, show that the findings from a qualitative and quantitative perspective differ. To conclude my presentation, I would like to tell you a short story. So please close your eyes and let me describe to you in August 2018 what a woman who was a colleague of ours looked like. And this is a result of a study, and I will describe this in great detail. So let's call her L. And I use the L is a cybersecurity expert. August 2018, 30 to 35 years old, who holds a postgraduate title and certifications. She works in the private sector. She is satisfied with her job and knows that her specialization is much sought after. Her colleagues in her specialization are mainly men. Lambda continuously carries out similar duties to the men. In recent years, she has been receiving more and more women who are joining her in the workplace. Her salary is satisfactory, but lags behind that of her male colleagues to a certain extent. Lags behind to a certain extent. I chose these words specifically. Her position in the management structure is quite important. She usually speaks to people who have high positions in the company's hierarchy, and there's quite a high potential that she may hold such a position in the future compared to most of the men she works with. As a person, Lambda believes that management should pay more importance to issues of cybersecurity, ensuring sufficient both human and material resources, and provide incentives for constant training and education. And on a personal level, because apart from working in cybersecurity, Lambda may also be a mother, a spouse, a partner, the daughter of elderly people who are disabled. These are all parts of her life. She's not only a cybersecurity expert, so she's concerned for this reason in finding the right balance between her personal and professional life and maintaining such a balance. What I just described to you, what I have outlined, is what the research shows with regard to the average woman who is a cybersecurity expert today in technologically advanced countries in North and South America, Europe and Asia. And in Asia, I specifically refer to and include arbitrarily Australia, I should have mentioned it separately, Singapore and South Korea, because you do realize the difference between all these countries. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, all that I have mentioned is the answer to a question that is very important and useful, but does not answer the main question, which is this. In my opinion, at least. And that's what I would like to put forward as my opinion also, in an attempt to outline and take part in the way you shall create your future dreams. Apart from the fact that we are all necessary, men and women, and all of us together are not enough. There are not enough of us, I mean. If we had 4 times this number, we still would not be enough. But there's a question that doesn't have to do with man or woman or the workforce even. It's a question that has to do with the technology we serve itself. I'm talking about the technology whereby when I returned to Greece in January 1984 from New York, was just being born and is now the focus. I held a position for the first time in this specialization at an academic institution, and today all universities have such professors and students who are working hard. Ladies and gentlemen, the establishment of a state of cybersecurity instead of a society of cybersecurity, ending up with a state of cybersecurity instead of the necessary society of cybersecurity, I repeat, we are afraid, often we panic about this, could lead to an counter-democratic impediment to the right and duty to express social opposition. This inconceivable creation that helps us move forward and could also create a barrier against something that is in decline. In a disorganized way, something that should be in decline, that is the legalization of the hegemonic bloc of traditional political formations. And I'm being very provocative. I don't believe we need to serve the non-democratic barrier. We need to uproot it. We need to stop it. And we have a very useful tool in order to do this. But this is a double-edged knife on the other hand. In conclusion, I believe, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, that our main duty we need to carry out as cybersecurity expert, all of us together, is to work in unison. And our primary duty is to ensure that what will continue sustainably will be a society of cybersecurity. Otherwise, the story of Big Brother and the animal farm, where some animals will be more equal than others, will no longer be simply an emblematic narrative, but will become a tragic reality. Thank you very much for your attention.
Εμείς ευχαριστούμε, κύριε καθηγητά, κυρίως όχι μόνο για τα πολλά και ενδιαφέροντα στοιχεία, αλλά κυρίως για τον τρόπο με τον οποίο ολιστικά προσεγγίσατε και κλείσατε.
Your holistic approach with regard to your presentation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends watching us online also, I'd like to invite to the panel the cybersecurity women, and we shall begin with Mrs. Georgia Dribacou. She is a cybersecurity analyst in Next Greece, processing services, part of Nexi Group, Mrs. Dimitra Liveri, who is the head of the awareness group and training group of ENISA, Mrs. Elisabeth Kouzoudaki, who is the head of the Department of International Affairs and Collaborations at the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece, and Eugenia Tsaprali, who is the head of the Planning and Remediation Department of the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece. Finally, last but not least, Mrs. Chara Kostopoulou, the head of the governmental satellite sector of the National Cybersecurity Authority. I'm going to sit here now in my corner as a good girl and begin. Ladies, I think the professor gave you the best introduction to the panel. And I believe that a very basic principle that was noted is that maybe women were delayed in becoming professionally involved in the sector, but once they did, it seems that we are moving fast extremely rapidly. And there is a whole number of issues that need to be looked at very carefully and that we need to focus on much more than we have been doing. I have in my hands the manifesto, Women in Cyberspace, which is a kind of a basic guideline on how we should proceed from now onwards. We have had very important information presented by Mr. Gritzelis, but I would like to ask you this and start with you, Mrs. Kouzoudaki. I think that this is a very ambitious goal that we're looking at, and I don't know how easy it is to put it into practice over the next few years. The truth is, the manifesto was an initiative of Concordia, which is an EU-funded project in which the National Cybersecurity Authority is a partner and was carried out in collaboration with Women for Cyber. Its goal is to highlight the need to attract women and support women in the field. So it begins with taking note of the current situation, which shows that women are the underrepresented sex in the field. Then it moves forward with asking why this is the case. And it is precisely what Mr. Gritzelis mentioned. The stereotype that is that cybersecurity is a strictly male-dominated sector, a very technocratic sector, and then continues by putting forward suggestions for types of action on 6 recognized fields: research and education, industry, investments, entrepreneurship, and legal and strategy issues, with the hope that it will raise awareness amongst people, that the stereotype will be subverted, and that actions will be organized that will change the situation radically. Do you believe that, well, we are lagging behind other countries from an objective point of view, but with regards to women in cybersecurity, do you think that Greece is on a par with the EU average? As Mr. Christopoulos mentioned, it seems that we are one step forward with regard to the average, but there's much more room for improvement. Mrs. Kostopoulou, you have long experience, yes, in the field of IT and cybersecurity. And I'd like to share with you also the dimension of evolution over time with regard to our position in the sector, the change of culture also, as I have experienced it. So things were different when you started and different today. Yes, there has been great progress. But we will be talking about this because, of course, there are more steps to be taken. Nevertheless, I'd like to also acknowledge the positive side of the matter, the changes in mentality. When I entered the workforce, I applied for a position in an organization which only employed men. I was going to be the first woman entering that work environment. And how was it when you started? Well, yes, the situation was slightly uncomfortable for everyone. Not that I was not made to feel welcome. However, the way I was treated was not the same way they treated the other male colleagues, and I could speak about this for hours. For example, for me to get the job, I had to prove during very long interviews, 2 in number, that I would be able to survive, that I was resilient, not that I was capable, but as that I could actually survive in that work environment, which is something that the male candidates didn't have to prove. Then, when it was time for promotions, it wasn't enough for you to have a good evaluation. But I was a woman and I was young. And these were the words that the director used. He told me that I had to be patient because I was a young woman compared to the men who had the lead. However, today, after all these years, I must say that I am fortunate enough to be working at the National Cybersecurity Authority, where about 40% of the workforce are women. Very high percentage, yes, compared to the average. But this is not representative of the situation in the market or the public sector in general. Nevertheless, it is indicative of the mentality. Yes. Well, I speak from my own perspective and would like to say that there's no lack of opportunity, no unequal treatment, and no problems with finding work, and some of us also hold posts of responsibility. But what makes me even happier is the fact that 40% is the number not as a result of quota. We weren't chosen because we needed to fulfill the quota with regard to women's numbers. They chose us because we were qualified and they believed in us. And I would like to say that through the activities we undertake and the initiatives, to say that our participation in cybersecurity should become self-evident. This discussion should be outdated in future, and we shouldn't speak about attracting women to the field, but rather about attracting capable staff. Mrs. Rivaku, I address myself to you because the private sector usually is more flexible and quicker to embrace innovative steps. Well, your experience from the private sector. How would you describe it? I'd like to point out, first of all, that cybersecurity in Greece and around the world is expanding, which means that also in the Greek private sector in the last 2 or 3 years, see that there are investments being made in this field, creating groups and supporting groups. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that now the groups are starting to get larger, employing more staff. Unfortunately, however, I'd like to say that the number of women is not very high in the sector. Maybe it's considered to be a more technical sector by some women, and that's why they don't apply to the private sector. And also, maybe the people who employ staff have this in mind also. Nevertheless, it's a multidisciplinary field, and we need to point out that any woman who wants to work on this topic should try her hand. So we observe that unfortunately, the number of women in the field is still not that large. The multidisciplinary element is one of the main stereotypes that we need to address. Maybe we could call it a stigma, because when people speak about cybersecurity, they only have in mind IT security. It seems to be a monolith, whereas this is not the case. Yes, you're right. Usually the first word that comes to mind when you speak about cybersecurity is penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, people working on forensics. People never think of a lawyer, for example, who has to work on personal data protection, a DPO, as the professor mentioned. You don't think of a communication expert or a marketing expert who has to work on the communication management of a cyberspace crisis. And allow me to interrupt and to speak on my behalf that this has nothing to do with the media. We're not talking about communications management. We don't mean what we're going to say to the journalists, but what we're going to say to the stakeholders, to all those involved, even to the hacker. So it's not media communication that we're referring to. That's only a very small part. Yes, it involves negotiation and how all the ecosystem will interact. So there are numerous needs that touch upon various fields. For example, information, education, planning, and how these work together. Speaking about information and awareness, I'd like to say that it touches on 3 levels. The first is the easiest, we could say, which has to do with attracting qualified professionals to the sector. Lawyers, communications experts, even economists to work in the cybersecurity sector. Second level of awareness must focus on experts who work in ICT, that is, women who are already working in the ICT sector. There aren't that many to move to the cybersecurity sector specifically. There is a very great connection between somebody who does systems management can very easily move to cybersecurity and work on his or her field. And the third has to do with STEM. That is, we need to do away with stereotypes and attract women to study STEM and then to cybersecurity. And that's the third most difficult part and takes more time, of course, because you need to have the awareness and according to this to plan your education and training programs. Mrs. Liveri is the head. You are the head of the awareness and training group of ENISA, of the EU Agency for Cybersecurity, which does amazing work. So I'd like your opinion. Do you agree with this categorization and prioritization that Mrs. Tsaprali mentioned concerning education and awareness? Well, The truth is, I don't know where to start with all that's been mentioned. The truth is, indeed, that there is a shift. The position of women is difficult, but nevertheless, I think what is important as a starting point is the fact that there is a need for specialists in cybersecurity, regardless of gender. Nevertheless, this is something that we have observed. Women potentially may not work in cybersecurity posts at the same rate as men, but in recent years, from a European perspective, the situation seems to be changing. The rates are changing. More women are holding posts of responsibility. And now we are speaking not only about the multidisciplinary dimension or a career shift towards cybersecurity from other professional fields, but we are also speaking about strengthening the technical background of women. So, during the last 6 years, ENISA has been organizing the European cybersecurity competition. It highlights new talent, young people aged 16 to 24, who compete on cybersecurity exercises. In 2018, there were only 9 girls participating in total in all European teams. This year, competition will be taking place next week, and 20% of the participants in the national teams are women. So there's a huge difference and increase. A great effort is being made by all of the member states. Some of them use quotas, but what we see in essence is that we have awareness raising amongst the public and training from the early stages and levels of the educational system, even from primary school. And this is all bearing fruit. As a result, the level of participation of girls who have a technical background is increasing, and then all the participants move on to positions with a technical background, and they become forensics analysts, investigators, chief information security officers. These are some of the top positions that one can hold with regard to cybersecurity in an organization. And at the same time, we see that there is a shift from other specializations towards cybersecurity. So this awareness raising is effective, and we see these changes taking place. Mrs. Kouchoudaki, globalization is everywhere. But when we speak about cyber issues, everything is globalized. Speaking about cybersecurity, have you identified any differences with regard to mentality, measures, best practices between not necessarily the EU member states, but between states and entities or supranational structures? Or is there a common ground where everyone moves at his or her own pace? Are there such differences? Because this is your field of expertise. Yes, well, the truth is somebody has to take the first step. And then when we see positive results, everybody follows suit. So in Europe, we see the EU at the forefront, and the member states adapt and follow. The US is one step ahead. The tiger of Southeast Asia, what about them in the field of cybersecurity? Well, they approach the issue from a different perspective. I won't admit that the Europe is lagging behind. No, I don't believe this. Maybe in the field of production of products and services, potentially, because we have the great business powers, mainly in the US and Asia, in this respect. However, the institutional framework of Europe is greatly advanced. And in that respect, the others follow suit. Do you agree, the rest of you? But from my experience, I have been taught about frameworks on cybersecurity since 2005, which means that the Americans had really achieved a lot in the field of cybersecurity, even from that time, with regard to awareness, best practices, etc. Europe may have taken some time in order to make cybersecurity more systematic, but we all know that GDPR is a very strong element of this. It is a regulation which has focused primarily on the protection of personal data of civilians, of any person, and it's very strict. It's a draconian system, we could say. Yes, but it makes me feel very safe. Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether it's necessary or not, it's not a simple framework. It's a framework that includes very specific penalties that have an aversive effect. It's one of the most harsh legal frameworks that exist. Yes, and just wait and see, because the NS Directive 2 is soon to be published, which is the legislation that will force critical information infrastructure, which now has a much broader spectrum, that is hospitals, public power corporations, postal services, to take cybersecurity measures and report to the national authority any security issue that has an impact on society. Yes, and I'd like to add also that the institutional framework, similar to GDPR, is something that companies must now implement, and that's very important indeed. So apart from having the institutional framework, companies are obliged to implement it. Yes, it's mandatory. Any company that has to comply with the GDPR has already done so, because it's mandatory. And this was a great step forward, even for companies that weren't mature enough to accept this. Okay, let me ask something else. Because of my age, maybe when I work in a sector, because I am older, people respect me and know that I mean business. But when you are a young woman, such as yourselves, working in the cybersecurity sector, and you go and speak to a private entity or any other interlocutor, the fact that you are young women, do people take you seriously enough, as they would maybe a young man who maybe goes in his shorts but could be considered a high-tech genius or a nerd? They respect them. Do they respect you as women? Yes, we could speak about this for hours, because you're right. Age still makes a difference. Sometimes when you have a young student going into a sector such as cybersecurity or IT, sometimes they are dealt with differently. Yes, but the difference is that if you get a young boy in strange clothes or a strange haircut, they will be viewed as a nerd, not as an experienced young person, as a genius, as a hacker. Yeah, you're right. Cybersecurity, very often in our mind, is connected to a hacker behind a screen, which means that it's much easier for a person like this to be considered a genius and work for a company. It's different for women. It depends on the company, but it is different. In this case, you have to prove more things. You have to be confident. That, with regards to the workplace, this is a situation. And of course, once you start working, you show how capable you are. But what about when you go and talk to a client, or when you want to go and check someone, or audit somebody's work, or persuade them to comply? What happens then? Well, in this case, well, actually, I could say that opinions differ on this. There are cases where the client will receive you and realize that you have the technical background and a view on the matter, and you can work together very constructively, but there are cases where this is not the case. Yes, the stereotype lives on. About you, ladies, you have an institutional role and power also. So how does it work for you? Time is needed for people to overcome this stereotype, and it's a question of character also. How quickly people will overcome this stereotype depends on each person's personality. What do you have to say on this after many years in the field? Well, I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to remember how it was and how it is. Yes, there are potentially still stereotypes with regard to this. However, I believe that people are not so quick to express them. Maybe because you also have the institutional stamp. Yes, I think people would be more careful in what they say. Yes, that's what I wanted to say as well. When you present yourself as Elisabeth Kousoudaki from the National Cybersecurity Authority, well, you don't leave much room for questions. I don't know whether you heard something very interesting that Mr. Gridzelis mentioned in his presentation. Women have to fight to prove on paper their knowledge, certifications, masters, etc. So, apart from the fact that we hold a position, we need to show our CV, or you may have to send something in advance to be checked, etc. We have to work hard to prove that we deserve this position. And something else that I wanted to add is that stereotypes are ingrained in people. Just imagine a doctor. You picture a man or a woman, a nurse, a man or a woman, a chief information security officer. Do you picture a man or a woman? So this is something very difficult to change. And we see this in all member states. It's a question of culture. In many cases, some member states in the north or more central have a more open mind with regard to these questions. And they perceive the social characteristics and the soft skills of women, which are essential to cybersecurity, whereas other countries in the south and as well are still working on this. Stereotypes is something that we are constantly working on, and the exchange of information and of these views amongst member states is very helpful. Let me now move to the National Cybersecurity Authority for two reasons. First, the role of the authority in the coming years, well, it's already very important, but in the next decade, I am certain that it will be number one pillar of security with regard to issues of internal and external security. Cybersecurity is something that is much bigger, and I believe this strongly. And sometimes I'm upset by the fact that cybersecurity is not looked at as seriously as it should be, just because we've lagged behind in all previous fields. It took us long to move to digitization. It took us longer to enter the world where others were already achieving so much. So do you agree that we need to double our efforts? And I'm talking about the level of government and decision-making, that our politicians, our opinion makers need to really become aware and plan actual policies for the sector rather than simply outlining some rules. I know that you represent the authority, but I believe that steps need to be taken before it's too late. I think that this is already being done, and if we look at the results, in the last few years, we have such an extensive digitization of services and IT systems being uploaded, which means that the surface of attacks is expanding, which means that the need to protect this area is also increasing, and decision makers are aware of this and will become even more aware in the future. So that means that our role will be more important also. Since you spoke about cybersecurity, I'd like to point out that we are now moving from cybersecurity to cyber resilience, the resilience of IT systems. So we're not only involved in protecting IT systems, but also we need to secure that they are resilient and can be recovered after a cyber attack incident. This is our focus today. So you are optimistic that there is the political will? Yes, I am. And what about you, Mrs. Kostopoulou? I am also optimistic that we will move forward as we should. Are we lagging behind right now? You mean compared to the rest of Europe? Yes. Yes. I mean, with regard to the structure of services, not your authority specifically, about cybersecurity services in general. If one were to map the public and private sector together and the awareness level of critical infrastructure companies, large private companies, are we on a par with the rest of Europe or lagging behind? I think we are lagging behind. I'm not trying to speak negatively, but well, I'm not aware. I wouldn't like to answer this question. I believe that the things can definitely be improved. However, I'd like to add that the people working in the field right now are working under very difficult conditions, and nevertheless are doing extremely valuable work, and we need to recognize this. Yes, obviously, things can be done more easily and better. This will happen. It's unavoidable. However, we also need to acknowledge the work that is being done. Yes, I'm the first to do so. But what I'm asking is, do private companies, for example, recognize this need, and those that need to comply, and those who need to realize that part of their budget should be spent on modernization of infrastructure because that may cost their clients violation of their personal data, etc., etc. Is this awareness prevalent? Well, I think that things have started to move. We have the institutional framework and synergies are being created between public and private sector and between companies. As you said, cybersecurity has no national borders, which means that we have synergies between companies and the private and public sector in order to protect each company and the country itself. Mrs. Liveri, you said this earlier, and I agree. When a strict institutional framework is imposed, from that point onwards, compliance is something that follows. Are there thoughts about the future beyond the frameworks that have already been put in place? Well, we need to move one step at a time. Are there views on the subject in general? Well, the approach of the EU in general is not to impose regulations and legal frameworks in order to oblige the private sector to take a position with regard to cybersecurity. What the EU wants to achieve is harmonization. That is, not to have a great diversity or differentiation between the member states. Greece is not lagging behind. Specifically, the whole of Europe is lagging behind with regard to cybersecurity, and that's why new legal frameworks are being instituted, and there is more time given to adapt so that all member states can come to the same level. Right now, all 27 member states all have a national cybersecurity authority. They all have a cybersecurity defense group, and they have all started speaking closely to the private sector in order to apply the general regulations and legal frameworks. So, to conclude, I'd like a brief comment about what the professor said at the end of his presentation speaking about a society of cybersecurity rather than a state of cybersecurity. And I believe that this is a very opportune point and very important differentiation. We should not be speaking about a state, but rather a society of cybersecurity. Yes, and we all need to be participating in this and be responsible and all have the incentive to leave behind a more secure world for our children. Society. Yes, that means awareness, that means education on cybersecurity issues. The state, well, you cannot achieve things by simply instituting new laws. We do not want to impose things, we need to build new things so that people want them to exist. And of course, this would avert people if it was more authoritarian. It would limit their freedoms if we were talking about a state of cybersecurity. It's very important to move to a culture, a mentality of cybersecurity and not an imposition. For us, the basis is education. And that's why we have been creating the educational roadmap with all member states in order to start together in all 27 countries, starting with the kids in nursery school. They need to be informed about cybersecurity. It needs to officially become part of IT classes so that, as Mr. Grizzly says, cybersecurity becomes part of our DNA and there's a cognitive process. I believe, Mrs. Pirioti, that discussions such as this one today helps for this objective of creating a society of cybersecurity, because through discussion, mentalities change, behaviors change, and institutions change, and that's very important indeed. Thank you very much, ladies. It was a great honor to moderate your panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation.
Okay. Recording stopped.